Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and welcome to the next in my series of videos where I will be looking at the BBC sitcom, latterly the Dave sitcom Red Dwarf in depth. I'm going to be looking at this series, series by series. So we're up to, well, only the second series now. We're up to Red Dwarf 2 now. Which was broadcast in September 1988. The same, unusually for a sitcom, the Series 2 was broadcast the same year as Series 1. I think Series 1 was pushed back a bit. And I don't think that the writers were very happy with Red Dwarf 1. They felt that it wasn't quite the program that they wanted it to be from certain production elements that weren't what they wanted it to be. So they actually insisted to the BBC that they don't repeat the first series because they felt that they could produce a much stronger series in the second series, make it much more akin to what they wanted, which was a heavy crossbreed of science fiction and comedy, as opposed to the first series, which is much more what the BBC initially wanted, which was your basic bog standard Steptoe and Son inspired sitcom that just happened to be set on a spaceship. Here they went, well, now let's look at what worked in the first series. What worked was the episodes, what worked really well was the episodes that got their fine balance between sci-fi and comedy. Those, probably the most notable exception would be Future Echoes and Me Squared. So, and of course the initial setup, which is a very science fiction setup. So that was the thinking this time around going in, that they'd produce 6 half hours more of comedy, try and paper over some of the cracks in the first series. They really didn't realise the series as they originally envisioned it until season 3, where you had pretty much a dramatic overhaul, almost a reboot of the series, if you like, just with the same cast. But here they did manage to paper over a few cracks, so they insisted that the BBC not repeat the first series. And indeed, I mean, I bought the first series on VHS probably around 1993, and there it's kind of famously, but it quite boldly said on the VHS tapes, never repeated on the BBC or only shown once on the BBC, which it seems like an odd thing to boast about, because I remember my dad looking at the VHS and going, well, is that because it's crap? Well, we'll see. I'd never seen the first series until I watched it on VHS. A lot of the same production team was still held over from the first series. So Ed By, who also, I think he started out as a runner or a production assistant on The Young Ones, and produced the first 2 series of Bottom, the strongest series. He's famously married to Ruby Wax. He came back as director, he would continue to direct series 3 and 4, and then return for 7 and 8 as well. Also returning was the initial producer Peter Jackson, who's who's kind of in the 80s at least, he was the granddaddy of comedy. He'd started out as working behind the scenes, actually on Steptoe and Son, and various light entertainment programs in the 80s, and then he got his break producing and directing The Young Ones, and so he was a very Craig Charles initially he put himself up for the role of Lister, not on the strength of the script. He later rather diplomatically said that he didn't really believe in the script that much, the initial script. He just didn't think it was that funny. But he thought that if he could ride on the shirt tails of Peter Jackson, then that would do his career a great service. The Lister character, funnily enough, isn't the he was never meant to be a 20-something kind of slobby, curry guzzling Liverpudlian. The original conception of the Lister character was something much more akin to Christopher Lloyd's character in Taxi, the kind of Reverend Jim character. He was meant to be this kind of brain-fried hippie in space. One of the big influences on Red Dwarf was Dark Star, the John Carpenter film. And I mean, if you had to pitch that film in a single sentence, it would be hippies lost in space. You could kind of see in the first series that there's some sort of leftover of the initial conception of that character. The scenes, the scene where Lister wakes up in the very first episode after being asleep for 3 million years, and you get the whole where are the crew? They're dead. Who's dead? Everybody's dead. Who? Peterson? Yes. Rimmer. The captain isn't, is he? Everyone's dead, Dave. Wait, are you trying to tell me everyone's dead? You can imagine that kind of scene working much better as if they'd kept to the original conception of the character, which was this brain-fried hippie character. And also, I believe he was meant to be much older as well, originally, Lister. He was meant to be about 40, 41. So, also interesting enough, like it was never meant to be a sort of, cast-wise, a sort of, it was meant to be an actor piece. The writers thought that actors could really bring out the comedy in the kind of deep character study that they were meant to do. So they wrote it with actors in mind. And I believe initially, this is pre-Die Hard, but they went to Alan Rickman with the thought of playing Rimmer, obviously. And Alan Rickman turned around and said, actually, I'd like to give Lister a go because I believe that, I don't want to get typecast, and obviously Alan Rickman would seem the ideal choice to play Rimmer, but he went and he actually lobbied for the part of Lister because he thought that this would something much more out of his comfort zone, a brain-fried hippie, something I don't think we ever really got to see Rickman do. Alan Rickman always played very Rickman-esque characters. Alfred Molina was also I think they went for him for Lister, but then there was a thought at the time that they'd swap the parts around because you could imagine Alfred Molina playing a slightly slobby character or a more hippified character. They didn't go with him in the end because I don't think Molina was comfortable in playing a character who was going to remain dead. He just couldn't get his mind around that concept. So it's funny in a way that parts that were initially written with actors in mind actually went to, in the end, a performance poet in the guise of Craig Charles, a stand-up comic impressionist with Chris Barry, and a dancer with Danny John Jules, and latterly Robert Llewellyn as well, who was also, and Norman Lovett, who were also stand-up comics. So not really a legit actor amongst the group, although interestingly enough, the first episode in series 2 is Crichton. He's not played by Robert Llewellyn, he's played by David Ross. And the thought of initially the idea behind incorporating Crichton back into the main body of the cast in the third season was actually to remain true to the original edict that they would have proper legit actors in this, legit being David Ross's words, not theirs. It also went against their rule that they would not have a comedic comedy android in because he was too close to Marvin in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I mean, they went with a different tact with Crichton. Famously, I mean, he was much more of a butlery type. He was, I mean, he's named after the Admiral Crichton, but spelt with a K, not a C. And I guess Crichton in this, he was a very much a different take on and just a trial run to see if the character would work. I mean, Crichton's like, comedy wise, it's probably the most, well, that and Queeg, it's probably the most character driven sitcom-y episode of the second series, and the funniest, and so that's really led to the decision to bring Crichton back in. But obviously, when David Ross, I think, was doing a play at the time, so wasn't available. But he was actually first choice before Robert Llewellyn to play Crichton. You can see they had a design overhaul in the third series, and they had all the characters got different costumes in the third series and third series onwards. So Crichton's outfit, of course, changed. It became something much more, as you'd imagine an android would wear, as opposed to this weird PVC butler outfit that he's got in. The mask is slightly different. It's a more white hue rather than the pink tone the pink sort of fleshy tone that they went with Crichton. Crichton's quite a bizarre bizarre looking character if you're not used to him. Just to go back a little way, so Peter Jackson produced this series. This was the last series of Dwarf that he produced. He was the one who really believed in the project and is responsible for getting it onto the BBC. Kudos to him for doing that. But apparently, if you listen to the behind the scenes stories, not the easiest guy to work with. He had, let's just say, anger management issues. And if you look at series 1 and 2 of Dwarf and the young ones, you can see that there's a real energy in a lot of the performances that's maybe lacking in later series of Dwarf, certainly, and that's largely down to the fact that anyone who works for Peter Jackson is just terrified of him. Apparently, he's an interesting fellow, a guy with anger management issues. But at the same time, there are people on the production team who do have a lot of good words to say about the guy as well. It was also the final series, as well as the costumes. It was also the final series to retain the original set designer. So it's the final series where you have the submarine-y looking set that the writers absolutely hated. They tried to infuse more colour into the series, and this time they do a redesign of the drive room and put more colourful buttons everywhere. And in the bunk room, you notice there's now posters on the inside of Marilyn Monroe on the inside of Lister's locker. There's an inflatable banana. Lister's guitar is on display much more, just to give more life, just to give something more visually interesting to look at. There is a theory, and I haven't. It's interesting coming up because one of the stills I've seen of the new series, the new episodes that are coming out now, is of Rimmer in the original uniform with the original large metallic H for hologram on his forehead that we haven't seen since series 2. And I know that Norman Lovett's returning in one of these series, and I know that one of the plot lines of one of the episodes is Rimmer goes off to find a parallel dimension. I'm just wondering if this is finally going to put paid to the theory that series 1 and 2 are in fact a different reality, a different dimension to series 3 and 4, and whether Rimmer's going to visit the original series 1 and 2 dimension. We'll see. That's a fan theory at the moment. I may be proved wrong on that point. So let's just look at the episodes in this. I've mentioned Crichton already, which very funny episode, but what my favourite episodes are always the sci-fi, the ones that get the heavy mix of this imaginative sci-fi conceptual stuff along with the comedy. Crichton and Queeg in this are very much the ones that I would place in strong sitcom territory, or at least the science fiction is bog standard. Oh, it's a robot, oh, it's a computer that runs rampant. Better Than Life is the second episode, and that was more born out of the writer's edict that the characters couldn't visit alien worlds, so there's no one to interact with, and there were 3 million years to Earth. So what's the solution to bring a bit of variety into this? So Better Than Life is one of an early use of virtual reality. The guys get virtual reality headsets and get to play a game where everybody's wishes, everybody's fantasies come true. Unfortunately, it's done kind of on a BBC budget at the time, so when they enter the game, they're meant to appear on a beach in paradise, but they appear on a beach in Rill, actually, which is it's always something that confused me. Why do they turn up on this horrible looking overcast beach where you can clearly see the wind and rain in their face? It was only much later I discovered, oh, that was supposed to be paradise. Oh, how weird. Then it's obviously just shot in like golf courses and the bars and golf courses, shops. But one of the classic episodes, Better Than Life, and of course a big inspiration. Well, the second novel is called Better Than Life, although the initial idea is retained, it's very much rejigged in that. It's much more of they make out that the Better Than Life game in the book is much more of like an addictive thing, where you can't actually remember entering the game, so you just end up trapped in it. And the actual events in Better Than Life are largely discarded in favour of a new story in which Lister, was probably much more would have been a lot harder to achieve on a BBC budget, but in the book it's Lister ends up living in Bedford Falls from It's a Wonderful Life, which apparently is his favourite film. Rimmer essentially becomes the richest man on earth, and Kat just lives on an island, and I think an island of Valkyrie women where he's a rock god king, and Crichton, of course, he's just happy being the cat's servant because there's plenty of washing up to do. Episode 3 is Thanks for the Memory. This is kind of it's like a mystery story, but the mystery, the MacGuffin that they have to go for after is to find out why they've had 4 days of their memory wiped, and it involves a plot line in which after a drunken birthday party for Rimmer, in which you find out This series is very strong and elaborating on the characters and giving them a lot more pathos, and this is the one where you find out that, because in Better Than Life you find out about Rimmer's relationship with his parents for the first time and why he was always a disappointment to them. In this one you find out that he's only ever had sex once in his life, so Lister implants a memory of his own into Rimmer of an old relationship that he had, and then very funny episode and great pathos moments. The pathos in it isn't something you really saw again much till series 7, I'd say, after Rob Grant left the writing partnership. Episode 4 is Stasis Leak, and that's if you've seen the Back to the Pilot episode in Family Guy, it's kind of that, really, in a way. I don't know if they ever saw Stasis Leak, but they essentially find it's a hole in time on the ship, and they're able to go back to the time where the crew is still alive, and there's and this is so you get Mac McDonald returning as the captain and Claire Grogan returning as Kachansky, and this is also sets up the theory that this is a parallel universe to later series, because it also states that in 5 years' time, Lister will be able to find another way to travel back in time, and then he will end up with Kachansky, and they'll end up getting married. This, of course, hasn't happened yet. 10 series later, so without any explanation as to why. So this, the parallel universe theory is also stacked up in that episode. Queeg is a really Rob Grant and Doug Naylor's take on 2001, at least the middle section of 2001. It's their version of the Hal story, in which Holly, the computer, is deemed computer senile. It's the first time you really establish that Holly isn't the quick, smart computer that he was in the first series. He's gone senile, and he's superseded by the backup program Queeg, played by Charles Orgins, who was interestingly Danny John Jules's dance teacher. And I believe if you watch Little Shop of Horrors, I believe there are actually shots of Charles Orgins and Danny John Jules in that, singing and dancing as backing singers. I think they might have also played the. Do you remember in Labyrinth the creatures that took the heads off and sang the Fire Dance song? I believe that they played two of them. And he was also in a series of Baby Sham adverts in the 80s. So not primarily an actor, but very, very good in the role. Very, the character of Queeg is meant to instill the fear of God into the crew, and you can imagine he comes across more as a drill sergeant rather than a dance teacher. You can imagine he would make a good teacher, just as someone who you'd want to do your best for, like Peter Jackson, because you're terrified of him. I wouldn't be surprised if Peter Jackson was at least in small part an inspiration for the Queeg character. As I say, not in a terribly imaginative episode like the others in the series, but very funny nonetheless. Also, interesting fact is the resolution to the episode is that Queeg didn't actually exist. It was just a practical joke played by Holly to get back at the crew for insulting him. But this was apparently a last-minute decision, because the writers had written themselves into a corner and they didn't know how to resolve this. They'd essentially killed Holly, and they didn't know how to resolve this, and so this was like a last-minute thought that they had. The final episode of the series is Parallel Universe, and this is one of the first of many times that Parallel Universe is incorporated into Red Dwarf. Again, in a series where they couldn't meet aliens, so there was little point in going to that many planets. So where do you go? Well, Parallel Universes seemed a good choice. The concept is it's basically a bizarro world from Superman, a world where everything's opposite. I always think that's a rather tricky concept to get your head around, because in a world where everything's opposite, how can you, why are they wearing grey uniforms? They should be whatever the opposite of grey is cream. Not everything is opposite, but a few. So whenever they do these ones, like in Star Trek and Superman, it's always only a few things that are opposite. I mean, the notable things that you find that are actually opposite is in this is it's an all-female cast instead of an all-male cast. So when they meet their counterparts in the parallel universe, with the exception of Kat, who's a dog in this. So Kat sadly has to hold on to his virginity. So some more. The So what was I going to say about this one? Oh yeah, so two things that are interesting. One, it's the introduction of Hattie Hatridge, who plays Hilly, as opposed to Holly. She got the job because of her deadpan style of delivery when she did stand-up comedy led her to be dubbed the female Norman Lovett. She, of course, took over from Norman Lovett in series 3 when Norman Lovett decided that because I think he'd moved to Edinburgh at the time and he didn't want to travel all the way to Manchester to make the show. So she took over from, and she was always my Holly. You know, I'm still lobbying for her to make a return. Actually, the other thing that's noteworthy about this is it ends on a cliffhanger that was never really resolved. Of Lister, because Lister has sex with his female counterpart, and of course, being an opposite universe, he gets pregnant. This was actually supposed to be resolved in the first episode of series 3. They wrote half an episode called Dad, which would resolve the Future Echoes plotline of him holding the two twins, and then I believe the idea was that the children, Jim and Bexley, would grow up at exponential rates, and then he'd return them to their mother in the parallel universe. In the end, they didn't do this episode because although Doug Naylor at the time had just had kids, so he was very keen to do child rearing humour. Rob Grant had not had kids, so he couldn't really engage fully with that script. If you want to see what would have been or what might have been, the on the Body Snatcher collection, the script in its incomplete form has been narrated by Chris Barry with storyboards made up, so you can kind of see where they might have gone with that episode, but the script is incomplete. It's only half an episode really in length. And in the end, it was just kind of explained away in the opening crawl narration of Series 3, which might be debunked anyway if the parallel universe theory of Series 1 and 2 is paid to. But overall, Series 2, it's a really strong series. Everything... I mean, the writers really fulfilled their promise of doing a much stronger series. It's arguably the funniest series there is. I mean, there's things I'm forgetting to mention. I of course forget to mention Tongue Tied, which opens Parallel Universe. It's the one that doesn't have the cold opening. It just starts with a song and dance number, and Danny John Jules singing a very catchy song called Tongue Tied, all about how which is actually a holdover of one of their sketch ideas from Son of Cliche, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor's, of somebody singing a song about getting tongue-tied when talking to a girl and then getting tongue-tied. Something I can relate to a lot making these videos. Nammy nurgy, nammy gurgy, tongue-tied. It's a very catchy tune, and it was in '93, I think, though thereabouts. It was actually released as a single, which, I mean, you could find the video on YouTube easily. I'm pretty sure I've seen it as a special feature on one of these discs, whether it's on this one or not. It might be on the Body Snatcher collection, but it's out there somewhere. But yeah, I mean, as a pure sort of 3 hours, 6.5 hours of comedy, it's a really it's arguably the strongest series. You know, not look wise. You know, it's nowhere near the sophistication of the later series. It still has that slight 70s, 80s Doctor Who quality, sneeze and the sets fall over aesthetic. But the laughs are there. There's some really funny moments in this. There's some really good, they were really on. This is where they, at least Craig Charles and Chris Barry, really mastered their double act, which was like in Septoislam, was really born out of animosity between the two actors at the time. So there's some very, very funny moments, really strong comedic science fiction and conceptual, imaginative ideas in this as well, and a fine gel of the two there. And so, can't recommend series 2 enough. So that's my thoughts on series 2. I'm going to see. I think it's Siliconia tonight, the episode 2 of series 12, and so I'll do my thoughts on series 3 and my initial thoughts on Siliconia in my next video, which I'll probably upload tomorrow. I'm thinking Siliconia, it's going to be the one where the crew gets turned into mechanoids. It's going to be interesting to see. It's essentially a reverse of the idea of DNA from series 4, but there you go. But until then, folks, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see everyone out there in YouTube land.